Welcome to Word Alive. Today we're going to have a look at Genesis 9. It's a crucial chapter in the Bible, marking God's covenant with Noah, the renewal of the earth after the flood, and the beginning of post-flood humanity. Let's start with verses 1 to 7. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." This echoes God's original blessing to Adam and Eve in Genesis 1:28, reaffirming humanity's purpose to populate and steward the earth. It marks a fresh start for humanity after the flood. And in verse 2 it says, "The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, upon every bird of the heavens, and upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish in the sea, into your hand they are delivered." A shift in the relationship between humans and animals. Before the flood, there may have been harmony. Animals not seen as food. Animals and humans lived together, but now animals would fear humans. This fear ensures that animals were able to survive, as humans now were able to look at them as a resource for food. Verse 3, it says, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything." Before this, humans were likely vegetarians. Now God explicitly allows meat consumption. However, the new privilege comes with restrictions and responsibilities. It says, "But you shall not eat flesh with its life," that is, its blood. You see, blood represents life, and that's reaffirmed in Leviticus 17. This restriction lays the foundation for later dietary and sacrificial laws in the Mosaic covenant. It underscores the sanctity of life and respect for God's creation. In verse 5, it goes, "And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image." That means that corporal punishment for the first time is mentioned in the Bible. If a man kills a man, he forfeits his life. If an animal kills a man, the animal's life is forfeit. Human life is sacred because God made us in God's image. People were different to animals, where animals are not made in God's image. Therefore, they don't carry the same level of sacredness. With animals, we should steward their resource wisely. But with humans, they carry and are made in God's image. This principle undergirds justice systems worldwide, emphasizing the value of human life. And in verse 7 it says, "And you be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it." This is a repetition of verse 1, reinforcing God's mandate for humanity to spread and fill the earth. Now let's have a look at verses 8 to 17. This is about the covenant with Noah, the rainbow. And in verse 8 it says, "Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark, it is for every beast of the earth." This is a universal covenant, not just for Noah, but for all future generations and even animals. This shows God's ongoing care and mercy for creation. In verse 11, it says, "I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is a sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations." It's interesting that God makes this covenant between himself, and he uses the words me and you, where conventional language would say between you and I. But this is from God. God is the controller of this covenant. God has made this covenant between himself and all living beings. God promises never to destroy the earth by flood again. This is an unconditional covenant. God binds himself to it regardless of human behavior. And in verse 13 it says, I have set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign to the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring floods over the earth, and the rainbow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you, and every living creature. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The rainbow is a visible reminder of God's promise. The phrase, I will remember, doesn't mean that God forgets. It means that he actively upholds his covenant. It is between him and us and all creatures, and he's the one that upholds this covenant. In verse 16 it says, when the rainbow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said this to Noah, this is a sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. The word everlasting indicates this covenant remains in effect even till today and for the rest of the days. The rainbow symbolizes God's mercy, God's hope, and God's faithfulness. Now in Genesis 9, things take a slight change. Well, now we look at Noah's drunkenness and the curse on Canaan. In verse 18 it says, the sons of Noah who went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the people of the whole earth were dispersed. The three sons became the ancestors of all post-flood humanity. Canaan is introduced, hinting at his role, which is later in the chapter. In verse 20, it says Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. So Noah transitioned from a shipbuilder to a farmer. Vineyards, interestingly enough, requires years to cultivate, to look after, and to make into a strong vineyard, implying that significant time has passed since the flood. And in verse 21, it says, he drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. Now this is interesting that it doesn't say it was a communal tent. It doesn't say that he was outside, that it was somewhere that it was for all people to be in. It was his tent. And in those days, that tent was for him and his wife. His grown sons would have had their own tents. The first recorded incidents of drunkenness in the Bible, this is not a condemnation of alcohol itself, but of excessive indulgence. It's interesting that Noah possibly had not had any wine for a great number of years. And if that was the case, if he was a novice drinker of wine, he would have only had to drink a small amount of wine for him to be rendered drunk. Overall, Noah was a righteous man, but still didn't know when to stop and had human weaknesses. Now, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, so saw him in his father's tent, and told his two brothers outside. The wording suggests Ham did more than accidentally see Noah. It implies dishonor and or ridicule. Rather than covering his father, Ham exposed his shame to others. Verse 23, it says, then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it both on their shoulders, walked backwards, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backwards, away from their father. They did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and knew that his youngest son had done to him, Shem and Japheth show respect and restore Noah's dignity. This highlighted the contrast between dishonor that Ham did and honor that Shem and Japheth did. Noah said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." The curse falls on Canaan, not Ham. That's interesting that it was generational. This foreshadows the later subjugation of Canaanites by Israel, descendants of Shem. Japheth's blessing may symbolize expansion and future inclusion in the faith of Shem's descendants, Israel. In verse 28 it says, "After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died." 350 years after the flood, Noah set up life as a farmer, as a father, as a grandfather, I would imagine a number of generations. And then he died. Noah's long life reflects God's early design for humanity before lifespans were shortened. And this marks the transition from Noah's story to the next phase of human history. What are some of the key takeaways of Genesis 9? God reaffirms human purpose. Be fruitful, multiply, and steward creation. The sanctity of life. Life is sacred and murder is punishable. That God's covenant is eternal. The rainbow is a lasting sign of God's mercy and faithfulness even today. Even the righteous can fail. Noah's failure reminds us to stay vigilant, to keep our eyes upon the Lord. Honor and dishonor have generational consequences. Ham's dishonor led to Canaan's curse, when Shem and Japheth's respect led to blessings. In this, because of Shem, his family became the lineage through to Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, through his blood and obedience, we ourselves can break any generational consequences that can come upon us, upon our family lines, that may be carried through our parents, our grandparents, or anybody in our line. They are broken. Those generational consequences and curses are broken in the name of Jesus. And that's from the lineage of Shem. I hope and I pray that the look here at Genesis chapter 9 has opened your mind, has allowed you to think honorably, what the difference between honor and dishonor, about Jesus Christ and the lineage that goes all the way back to Genesis of Jesus Christ. God had a plan and he still works that plan today. Have a wonderful day. God bless.